This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. You shall not murder. That is Exodus 20, verse 13. Guys, apologies for the late show today. I know some of you are very, very used to on Thursday mornings waking up and having a show ready to go in your inbox. So the point of today, or I guess the plan for today, was I was going to interview Mark Wayne Mullen this afternoon. That was going to be, the monthly Mark Wayne Mullen appearance, and we were going to get an inside view of what's going on in the Senate. But because of his job working in the Senate and Kash Patel being confirmed as the new FBI director today and some stuff going on with the governor of Puerto Rico and different things, we were not able to pull this off for today. And so here I was like, crap, now I got to get something together. But luckily there was already something on my mind, and the way the cookie was going to crumble with the release schedule, I wasn't going to be able to talk about it for a few weeks. And so I'm actually, fairly pleased that I was able to talk about it this early. But again, apologies for getting this out to you late. Before we move on, I did just want to remind you guys, Church of 1122 Men's Conference is happening this year, October 17th and 18th in Jacksonville, Florida. The speakers are Joby Martin, the guy who's actually running that church, so maybe I can get his name right, Joby Martin, Willie Robertson, John Tyson, Brian Laritz, and me, yours truly. So if you want to go there and check everything out, I'm telling you guys, this will sell out. Check it out in the show notes. You can go to the show notes and check out a link to where you can buy your tickets to go to the Church 1122 Men's Conference, or just Google search Church 1122 Men's Conference. Thank you as always to our donors. And guys, if you have not shared the show with a buddy or left us a 5-star review, go ahead and do that. And because of today's show and me having to just kind of scramble this afternoon to get something together for you guys, there will not be any quick hitters. But obviously here recently on my solo episodes, I've been kicking hornets' nests, as it were, and there's been a lot of times throughout the history of Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast, where I've gotten flack. I've gotten some negative feedback to some of the things that I've said. I've gotten some disagreements and some vehement disagreements on some of my positions. So, my stance on contemporary Christian music, and then attached to that, my stance on metal music, my stance on gay adoption and surrogacy, my stance on people owning pit bulls, my recent episodes on Martin Luther King Jr. and women in combat roles. But I've probably gotten the most severe and certainly the most personal amount of negative attacks and feelings and anger because of what I said on episode 582 of this podcast, and that's Christians should not use IVF. That was the name of the episode. So if you're new to the show, you might be shocked to hear that, but I would just tell you, please stick with me. Okay. So for some of you, your heart rate and your blood pressure just went up, but just relax just a little bit. But because of that episode 582, I lost some long-time personal friends. I heard about some people that were trying to work with some of the people that we have very deep and meaningful professional relationships with. We're trying to get those people to disassociate from me. So they were essentially trying to cancel me. And the thing that became clear with all these people, right? The people that reached out to me directly, the people that got into my DMs, people that were trying to ruin some of my personal relationships and business relationships and things like that, is that none of these losers engaged with my content. And I'm calling them losers because they did not engage with my content. If you disagree with me, that doesn't make you a loser, but depending on the subject matter. But these are people that read the title of the episode, Christians should not use IVF, and then they just assumed what I said. But if you go back and listen to that episode, and if you haven't yet, I would, stop what you're doing now and go listen to that before you listen to the rest of this. I spent 45 minutes elucidating my position on IVF and talking about it. And these people read the title and they just assume they knew what I was going to say. And so if you're going to be foolish, if you're going to be intellectually dishonest, then I don't care about your commentary. I'm not going to take critique from someone that I would not take advice from. Okay. But even with all of that in mind, we do need to talk about IVF again today because of a recent executive order that just came down from President Trump's desk. So on February the 18th, so this was just a couple of days ago, Trump put out an executive order signaling that he wants to significantly expand access to in vitro fertilization, or IVF. So he said on the campaign trail that he was going to do this. So this isn't a surprise. This shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. But here's the thing. I vehemently disagree with him on this. I voted for him. I suggested that everyone in my audience vote for him. Certainly he is better than what we've seen or would have seen from a Joe Biden administration second term, or Kamala Harris technically first term. And I've been very open over these last several months about how excited I am about him getting into office, about some of the things that he's doing, some of the appointments that he has, even including Kash Patel today. I'm very, very excited about this. But guys, we have to be intellectually honest and consistent. And we have to call balls and strikes with all politicians and all people. Wasn't that my point of the Martin Luther King Jr. episode? He shouldn't be treated like anybody else. He should be treated like everybody else. okay? He should be judged for his sins and judged at how moral he was, and he should be looked at as anyone should be looked at, which is a fallible sinner. And the same thing applies to anyone that you would cast a vote for. But in this executive order, Trump sets out really two main goals. There's a fact sheet that I'll post in the show notes. The first goal is to lower the cost of IVF. And the second goal is to reduce the barriers for people to get IVF treatment. So guys, again, if you want a deep dive on this subject, okay, because this episode today is going to be pretty quick, then stop what you're doing and go back and listen to episode 582 of this podcast. So wherever you're listening to this, episode 582, but I am going to give you some highlights of some of my points. But before we do that, I do want to just acknowledge for all of you just a few things. I just want to make a few things very, very clear here from the very beginning. First is that the birth of any baby, regardless of the circumstances of their conception, is a blessing from God. So I don't care if they were created with IVF and they're here now. I don't care if they were conceived in rape. That's a point I make in all the pro-life talks I do. Is like, I don't care how you were conceived. It is a blessing from God that another image bearer is now alive outside of their mother's womb and existing in the world, okay? Another thing is that my own extended family, and I said this back on episode 582, my own extended family has expanded because of IVF. I have a niece and a nephew that I happen to love very much that are only here because of the IVF process. And also, I know that many Christians have seen IVF as an answer to prayer, okay? And I know some of those people were some of the ones that were very, very offended at the fact that I would even talk about IVF in a negative way. But part of the reason why they were so offended is because I exposed some of the moral things that they hadn't considered before going into the IVF process. But before we even talk about IVF, which certainly we'll get there, we do have to just set the stage and set the foundation for when life begins. So it doesn't matter how you talk about it, whether biblically, theologically, morally, scientifically, whatever, in all those ways. Life occurs, life is created when a one-celled sperm cell from dad combines with a one-celled egg cell from mom to create a one-celled zygote. At that precise, exact moment, new life is in the world and taking up space. All of the DNA information for that human being is present at that exact moment, and immediately cell division, multiplication, and size increase begins to take place. And guys, if you draw a line of when quote-unquote life begins at any point after the line of conception, you're wrong. Okay, so you don't just have like a bad opinion that I disagree with, you're just flat out wrong. But the first thing that we kind of need to talk about is that people in general, so just general population, right? People in general have given very little thought to the IVF process. Most people are ignorant on the subject, as I was until I heard some people talking about IVF in a somewhat negative light and bringing up some of the moral issues with it. I was like, well, I thought IVF was just kind of this neutral thing. It's just like getting your tonsils out or something like that. Oh, they're just creating babies in a dish and then, shoving it into mom. And hey, 9 months later, pop out, this beautiful, lovely little baby. But most people are just ignorant on the subject. But also people in general, even those that have participated in the IVF process, that have gone through it themselves, have gone through different cycles, they have thought very little about the moral ramifications of the IVF procedure. I talked about that just a little bit earlier. And here's the thing is most people don't even know what IVF is. They don't know how to spell it. They don't really know anything. But again, I go into a deep dive in episode 582. But in brief, IVF is the process of mature eggs that are collected from ovaries and fertilized by sperm in a lab. Okay. And then a procedure is done to place one or more of the fertilized eggs, these are the embryos, in a uterus of a woman, which is where babies develop. Okay. That's the IVF process. Now, IVF is very expensive. Surely you've probably heard about that. And now currently it costs roughly $20,000 per cycle. And so if these cycles are not successful, you can see how a family could rack up, 6 figures worth of debt just trying to conceive and get babies born. Now, because of the expense of IVF, many couples will hedge their bets, as it were, and they will make 5 to 12-ish embryos, and they will implant several into mom and then freeze the rest, or they will implant several into mom and then just throw the rest away. Remember what I just said about when life begins? And how there's debate, but there are people that are just right, and then there are people that are just wrong. At the moment of conception, one-celled zygote, that's new life. That's new human life. And there are people that go through the IVF process. They will implant a bunch of embryos into the uterus and they will just discard the rest because they don't want the annual expense of, around $1,000 or so to keep them frozen. But we'll talk more about the freezing of them here in a second. But here's a problem that happens is, let's say multiple embryos take, right? So multiple ones are put in there and then they all take. So all of a sudden a woman is pregnant with triplets or quadruplets or quintuplets or something like that. Well, most of the time, mom doesn't want to go through that. Mom and dad didn't think about that. And the doctor is thinking, hey, this could be a problem for mom's health. So almost always a process of selective reduction occurs. Isn't that a turn of phrase? Selective reduction. So that's a euphemism for abortion. So a doctor will look at all of these fertilized embryos and then, they'll say, Mom, hey, do you want to keep 1, 2? What do you want to do? Again, this is kind of like ordering pizza, I guess, for some people. And then they will just zip zap and kill these living human beings that are currently residing in their mother's uterus. Just whoop. Selective reduction. So now when you talk about what happens to the frozen human beings, okay, so what about the ones that are not implanted but are just frozen? So these human beings remain frozen until they are implanted. So some people will implant some now and then see how that goes, and down the road may implant some more, but the majority of them never will be. Some of these frozen human beings will actually be adopted, right? So that's actually a thing. People will adopt frozen embryos and then implant them into uteruses and kind of go from there. But the majority of these people will never be adopted and then implanted. But what's most likely to happen, because this happens to the overwhelming majority of human beings that are frozen because of the IVF process, they're eventually going to be thrown away because there's only so much freezer space. A lot of these frozen human beings have been completely discarded by their parents. Maybe they spent 2-3 years paying for these frozen embryos and they realize, okay, we've got enough kids. We don't want them anymore. We don't want to go through the process of donating them or any of that type of stuff. And so they just get rid of them. They tell the facility to get rid of them. So let's talk numbers a little bit. So this is according to Live Action President Lila Rose, who's been on the show several times. Here's a quote from her. Only 7% of human embryos created via IVF will result in a live birth. 93% of these lives are frozen indefinitely, miscarried, or aborted. Over 1 million embryos are frozen in the United States. Over 1 million. And that number, obviously, as IVF becomes more ubiquitous, will just continue to grow. There are other countries, I believe the UK, the estimates are several million human beings are currently frozen. Right. And it's hard to get exact numbers on these because, again, most of these labs aren't exactly forthcoming about the number of human beings they have, in arrested development frozen in their freezers inside of their facilities. Right. Just think about that. 93% of these lives that are created will not survive. They will not result in a live birth. And then this next one, this is according to Katie Faust. She's the founder of a child first advocacy group called Them Before Us. Quote, fertility care is a euphemism for designer, disposable, and donated to research lab-made babies. Big fertility likely destroys 4 times more embryonic life annually than Planned Parenthood. This is an anti-child executive order, unquote. So we need to put that in perspective, okay? If she's correct, and she would likely know, in the last year, the last year that we have stats, so 2023 is the last year we have solid stats from Planned Parenthood. But in 2023, Planned Parenthood murdered 392,715 children via abortion. So 392,715, almost 400,000 children, Americans, were murdered via abortion by Planned Parenthood, right? That's in their annual report. They're very, very proud of that number. So according to Katie Faust, if her numbers are correct here, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.6 million children will die as a result of the IVF process in the same calendar year. 4 times the number of babies murdered by Planned Parenthood. So you can surmise, hence the title of today's episode, IVF kills more people than Planned Parenthood does. And don't y'all hate Planned Parenthood? Don't y'all love when I rail on them on the show or on my Instagram page or something like that? Don't y'all just like, yeah, we need to, aren't y'all big on let's defund Planned Parenthood, which I am obviously big on defunding Planned Parenthood because of what they do. Their main, gift to society is killing human beings. And let's say Katie Faust is wrong by 75%, then the exact number, like again, this is if she's super, super, super duper wrong. The exact number of human beings that Planned Parenthood kills every day is roughly the number of human beings that will die because of IVF. Think about that. So I do at this point need to go ahead and address some of the pushback that I know I'm going to get. And so if, most of these people probably stopped listening about 10 minutes ago, but some of the examples are like, hey, Kyle, like there are Christian IVF facilities they're doing 1-to-1 IVF and they're trying to make it even cheaper and more affordable. And, in order to make IVF tech even better and to have breakthroughs where, more babies can be successfully born, we just need to keep IVF available. But let me explain it this way. Here recently, I replaced 2 of my televisions. Okay. I went to Sam's and I spent $700 and I got 2 65-inch like OLED TVs or OLED, or however you're supposed to say it. 2 65-inch televisions for $700. I remember spending $1,500 on like a 56-inch television like within the last decade. So what gives? Why are TVs so much cheaper? It's because in the early days of flat screen technology and those types of things, a bunch of rich people drop like, 10, 15, 20 grand on these, flat screen, LED, plasma screen, whatever televisions. And when enough people buy those, it proves to the marketplace that there is going to be a market for this in the general populace if the price gets down to a certain level. Technology starts to get better. You can start making them more cheaply. And then over time, it leads to where you can get an amazing television for an incredibly low price. Again, $350 a TV for a 65-inch like television. That's great, right? So guys, in order to make IVF cheap or readily available for most people, right? That doesn't happen magically. Like that doesn't happen because Donald Trump says so. It doesn't happen because, more insurance companies decided that they were going to start covering the process. It happens through trial and error and technological innovation. And in order for that to happen, guys, again, just looking at the numbers that I talked about earlier, millions and millions of babies all over the world are going to have to die for that to be a reality. Millions and millions of babies are going to have to be sacrificed on the altar of, hey, this might be cheaper and more ubiquitous and we might be better at it in the future. But here's the thing, guys. Some of these facilities, they don't want that. Like, yeah, they want returning customers, right? So if you're doing this 1-to-1 thing, eventually people are going to stop doing that. Like, and there are a lot of parents that don't want to do that because I get the pragmatism of, well, why not create a bunch of these human beings? Because we're just going to be injecting them and, just waiting and seeing, right? So why do this 1-to-1 thing? Let's be more efficient, right? And this is kind of one of the main problems with this whole IVF debate is when you worship at the altar of pragmatism and not at, the altar of the God of the Bible, it can lead to the murder of innocent image bearers of God. So a lot's been made about the fact that most Western countries, the U.S. included, were below replacement rate. So this is actually a quote from the executive order. The general U.S. fertility rate is at another historic low. The rate dropped 3% in 2023 from 2022. From 2014 to 2020, the rate consistently decreased by 2% annually. So basically, right now, we don't have enough people that are going to be born to pay for the crap for the people that will be still alive later on down the road, right? We are below replacement rate as a people, which is a major financial problem for the biggest economies and biggest countries all over the globe. It's a major problem. So you're thinking to yourself, well, the pragmatic thing would be, more babies. But as opposed to saying, hey, let's not kill 1 million babies a year as a country via abortion, like as opposed to doing that, you have the Democrats that are like, hey, let's just do wide open borders, right? Wide open borders. We'll just have any number of people come in. Yeah, we'll get some terrorists and some MS-13 gangbangers and, Trinidad guys like, murdering people and beheading them and throwing them in ditches. But hey, we'll get more people, right? We'll be able to solve some of the crisis. And then I guess Republicans are like, hey, let's just open up the doors wide for IVF, right? But at this point, I want to go ahead and reiterate some of the points that I made in episode 582. So all of these are deeply morally problematic from a Christian worldview, and we need to dig a little bit deeper. So the first thing is that almost always, right? Almost always, the IVF process results in the death of image bearers of God. I've elucidated that in quite a bit of detail so far in this episode. Almost always, that's what happens. Also, it commodifies human beings. So you will hear these stories of these women, these single women that want babies, but they don't want a man, right? They don't want a man. I don't need a man. So they got handbags, they got an important job, but they want to go ahead and get a kid. I guess they need an extra accessory or something like that. But they don't want a man because they've been marinating in first, second, third, and fourth wave feminism for however many years. So they will go to these facilities that will give them a catalog. Well, hey, do you want a sperm donor who's tall, athletic, black, white, Asian, a really good ACT, went to an Ivy League school? Like, what do you want? Do you want blue eyes, brown hair, blonde hair? Like, what do you want? It commodifies the donors of the eggs and the sperm. It makes a commodity out of the human being that's created. How about the women's bodies that will have these human beings implanted into them by women who don't want to carry them, or gay couples? More on that in a second. Right? Well, actually, we'll go to that right now. This whole IVF thing opens the door for same-sex couples to, quote unquote, conceive their own children. So there are gay couples, right? So two men, what they will do is they will both jerk off into a cup, and then they will do something called a swirl. So they'll throw all their jizz into one cup, right? They swirl it around, and then they'll pull out they'll pull out a sperm cell, and we don't know which dad it is, right? Now, eventually, depending upon how different the dads look at that point, we're going to be able to tell, where that person came from or whatever, and we can run tests to do the exact same. But then they're just going to combine that with a designer egg from some, wonderful, beautiful donor, smart donor, and then they're going to put it into the rented womb of a woman. So a woman is going to create a chemical and physical and bodily connection to a human being, and then as soon as she gives birth, she's going to have some nurse walk her baby over to a couple of narcissistic gay men, so that they can have an accessory at the next Pride Parade. That's what IVF does. Do we want that happening? Right? And the same thing happens with lesbian couples, just slightly differently, obviously. And one of the things it does is it removes procreation from the conjugal union. This is one of the big points that Albert Mohler makes, is like, the conjugal union is so important, and it is a gift for all of humanity, that God saw fit to tie that extreme satisfaction of that process to the process of procreation. But when you do this, you could literally be a married couple that doesn't have sex but has children. It becomes disordered, right? And here's a new one that I was just made aware of. One of my good buddies and good supporter of the show sent me this story. This process has very, very many issues, okay? The IVF process has a lot of issues, and some of them are fairly extreme. So this is actually according to CBS News. This news story came out on February the 18th, which is the same day as this executive order. Christina Murray, I believe that's how her name's spelled a little differently, but Christina Murray, a white woman, realized something went wrong at Coastal Fertility Specialist Clinic in May of 2023 when she delivered a baby that did not match the appearance of the sperm donor she had chosen, who looked similar to her with dirty blonde hair and blue eyes. Instead, on December the 29th, 2023, she delivered a baby who was black. Murray said she didn't know what to do but take care of the baby, including breastfeeding him, taking him to doctor's appointments, and cuddling him throughout the day. But the following months were full of anxiety for the new mom, attorney Adam Wolf said. Murray never posted photos of the child online or allowed her friends and family to see him. She eventually purchased an at-home DNA kit, and the test results she received in late January 2024 confirmed what she already knew according to the complaint against Dr. Jeffrey Gray and Coastal Fertility. On February the 5th, 2024, Murray reached out to the fertility clinic, who later informed the biological parents of the baby about what happened, according to the complaint. The baby boy was 3 months old when the couple, who lived in another state, sued Murray for custody. To carry a baby, fall in love with him, deliver him, and build a uniquely special bond between mother and baby, all to have him taken away? I've never fully recovered from this, Murray said through her attorney. Murray voluntarily gave up custody of the boy in May 2024 after her family law counsel concluded that she was going to lose the custody battle, the complaint said. She said she hasn't seen the baby since. Murray is seeking a jury trial, $75,000 in judgment, and other damages, according to the lawsuit. In a statement to CBS News, Coastal Fertility Specialists acknowledged the mistake and apologized for the distress that was caused. That happens with an IVF process, right? Just absolutely excruciating. Now, as a Christian, obviously, you should not use nor support the use of IVF because of all the reasons that I listed above. You just can't. Again, remember me telling you guys at the beginning of this year, enough of this nuanced gray area language. Some things are simply black and white, and this is one of them. Because guys, if you consider yourself to be legitimately pro-life, okay, you should not use nor support the use of IVF because of the reasons I listed above. Because a lot of people think, well, hey, I'm pro-life. Like, are you? Are you? Because to be clear, if you are pro-life, you have to be pro-life in all circumstances. You don't get to pick and choose when it's convenient. You have to be pro-life, which means you have to be anti-IVF. But as I close out my commentary here, I want to reiterate some of the things I said in episode 582. Again, if you're struggling with infertility, you probably turned this off a long time ago, but if you're still here, please listen to me. Trust God to provide, which is easy for me to say, right? Oh, because I have two boys that are here, James and Eli, 4 years old and 2 years old, right? But we lost 2 children, right? We miscarried. We technically have 4 kids. I only got to meet 2 of them, right? So we have our own pain in this area. We have a lot of friends that we've walked arm in arm with down this infertility journey, and it is horrible. It freaking sucks. It sucks bad. But what do you have left other than trust God to provide? Which leads to the next thing, which is some of you need to swallow the hard truth that God's answer to your infertility prayers might be not now, not yet, or no. For some of you, the answer is just no. And it may never be revealed to you this side of glory why that is. But again, you have to trust God to provide you with understanding and with the ability to continue going with that resilience. Also, there are hundreds of thousands of children in this country that need good moms and dads like you. Some of you are already good parents. You don't have kids yet, right? Like, it's just who you are. AdoptionNetwork.com estimates that there are like 400,000 American children that are in the foster care system right now. They don't have a forever family. 400,000, roughly the number of people killed by Planned Parenthood every year. So maybe that is your road to parenthood. Maybe that's what you were called to do. Seek God's guidance there. But as we wrap up today, the gift of life doesn't erase the sin of murder, okay? The gift of life does not erase the sin of murder. So for some of you, when you created 7 embryos and you implanted 3 and they all took, and you're like, oh, I don't want 3 babies, let's just do 1. And you just selected the one that you wanted to keep, that was murder. Again, there's no nuance here, right? It doesn't matter if you had malice in your heart. What you did was kill an innocent image bearer of God. For those of you that don't implant all of the human beings that were created, there are major moral ramifications of that. I want you to have the gift of life, but you can't murder people in the process. Hey guys, real quick. Do you remember during the pandemic when you basically couldn't get anything shipped to your house? All this manufacturing that was supposed to be taking place in America had been shipped overseas and you just didn't notice it. And I remember a bunch of companies saying, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we bring manufacturing back to America, and almost none of them followed through on that promise. But for me and for all of us here at Undaunted.Life, I wanted to make sure that I partnered with an American company that actually did want to prioritize American workers, their families, their communities, and a company that would keep their word. And that's why I want to remind you that we are partnered with Origin. Origin is an apparel company based in Maine, and what do they make? They make the best jiu-jitsu gis on the planet and the only jiu-jitsu gis that are made completely in America. They also make jeans. Yes, they have stretchy jeans. They also have work jeans and bootcut jeans for you guys as well. They make amazing hunting gear. And here's the thing. I know you guys like some other hunting brands, but those companies are American companies that use overseas labor to increase their profit margins on their gear, not to help you or Americans out. They also offer handmade leather boots. That does include steel toe boots and mock toe boots. And they also make workout clothes and everyday pants and shirts and almost indestructible hoodies. And they're launching new apparel all the time. Guys, if you haven't already tried Origin stuff, you need to check them out and support a company that supports Americans. Try Origin out today by going to www.originusa.com. That's originusa.com. Use the promo code UNDAUNTED to get 10% off your order. Again, that's originusa.com. Promo code UNDAUNTED to get 10% off your order. All right, guys, that'll do it for today. Again, no quick hitters today, but there are things in the show notes to where you can donate to our ministry, apply for our Dominion coaching program, and get your tickets for the Church of 1122 Men's Conference. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.